It's episode 35 of the CelticsBlog podcast, the Banners broadcast. And now we feature none other than one of the greatest Celtics writers there's ever been. Or, you know, not. I don't know.
A Celtics writer. He is a Celtics writer.
And he comes from Celtics Hub, and now you can call him a writer for CelticsBlog because he's on the team, and that means he's on the podcast. He's Sam Sheehan.
Bobby, thanks for having me. I'm excited to disappoint everyone, but we're gonna keep it nice and loose. I feel like this is gonna be a fun podcast.
So while Sam gets his vocals ready, sipping on his tea or whatever is there,
yeah, that's what
I gotta say. This show is gonna strike a different tone than the one we had last week with Jimmy Toscano. We were waving the flag, shutting the series down. Toscano must have given it like a 5% chance of becoming a series again, and all we were asking is what's wrong with the Bucks. So now we're going to flip it back the other way and say what happened to the Celtics, because they got into one of those strings between games 3 and the early portion of game 4 that we saw last year in the Wizards series, and then of course back in that previous playoff run where there'd be massive stretches where this team can't put the ball in the net. Dr. Sheehan, give it a diagnosis.
I really think it begins and kind of ends with turnovers. I mean, I hate to bring it back to that because that's kind of boring. That was everyone's diagnosis before the series. But if you look at the last 2 games, that's really kind of what's been, I don't know, jumping out at me. I have a piece coming out tomorrow. I don't want to spoil it too much, but I'm kind of addressing this turnover problem, and namely some of these deep bench guys like Morris and Greg Monroe. Some of these guys have had real turnover problems, and it's really hurt the Celtics in the long run because you cannot. The Bucks are just so lethal in transition, particularly Giannis. If he's leaking out every chance he gets, and so it doesn't even necessarily need to be turnovers. Things like blocked shots, broken plays like that. The Bucks are running on those possessions, and they're getting these high percentage looks at the rim. If you look at the Celtics kind of over the course of the series, they're actually pretty middle of the road in terms of playoff teams to upper end when it comes to the offensive efficiency, which seems insane given the rock fights we saw in Milwaukee. But it's really the defensive efficiency that's really killed the Celtics. They're the worst playoff team that's still alive. The only team that had a worse defensive efficiency in the playoffs is the Trailblazers, who have already gone home and are done their exit interviews and everything like that. Yep. So to see the Celtics just, I think that turnovers are, kind of creating this defensive problems and they're also just so deflating, and it can be so hard to get back into your offense. So hopefully the home crowd can kind of re-energize the Celtics and kind of get them back on the right page as far as that stuff's concerned.
And they're not turnovers, but the blocked shots have been insane. Mm-hmm. Just the sheer volume of them. And Stevens talked about after Game 3 that once you get in that hole, a lot of his players have been starting to force the issue, and that creates even more blocked shots, even more turnovers. It's just kind of the spiral effect. And when we're talking adjustments, the Bucks have made them. They went down the bench to Thon Maker, who wasn't playing at all toward the end of the regular season and even into the postseason, and now Giannis is calling them the game changer in the series. And I actually did add in a piece after Game 3 too. His emergence, and Jabari Parker's too, to a higher degree because he's given them more offense than Maker is, has sort of made the Bucks who we all thought they could have been back under Jason Kidd, just this disruptive menace that has really torn the Celtics apart. I don't even recognize the Celtics right now. Look how good this team was defensively all year, and then offense came and go, but early in the series they looked like they were going to get whatever they wanted against this Bucks defense, and now it's just the complete opposite. So I think the Bucks finding themselves has done as much as anything to throw the Celtics off.
Yeah, I mean, you got to get credit where credit. I made a joke today on Twitter that the Celtics have had 5 really important injuries that really went against them, and it was Marcus Smart, Kyrie Irving, Gordon Hayward, Daniel Tyson, John Henson.
Yeah,
just because it's kind of allowed Milwaukee to sort of find a better rotation for themselves. Brogdon coming back. I mean, the Bucks also got healthy at the right time, which the Celtics did not. They're getting Brogdon back. Dellavedova in fits and spurts. I mean, he won the game for them in Game 4. On that Marcus Morris, with that disruptive little Marcus Morris, those 2 points ended up being the game at that end of first quarter.
Yeah.
Things. So things like that have been helpful, and it kind of it nullifies that that coaching advantage that the Celtics have. I would like to, credit where credit is due, though. It's really impressive to see Thon Maker out there. 38-year-old guys like that being able to jump. It's really, it's impressive.
I said before the show we weren't going to do that, but you went and did it.
Well, I mean, I'm
this
sorry.
Isn't the Celtics post-game show. We have standards around here.
Okay, he's 29. I'm sorry. I apologize.
All right. Let's pull it back and talk about rotations, because the Celtics, I mean, can you do the math right now? 11 players. I don't even know how many possible rotations there are, but it seems like there's 2. And they're pretty much going between big ball and small ball at this point. And I'm labeling it big ball. I don't think it's going to catch on, but that's what they were rolling with early in the series. Yeah. And against the smaller lineups Milwaukee was throwing out there, Greg Monroe was able to have an impact in this series. Al Horford was thriving. It seems like decades ago. He had the 22-12-4 game in Game 1, and he was back. And he has still persisted throughout this series with effective play, so I'm not going to get on him too much. But it does seem like the Celtics are in a little bit of an identity crisis right now. They don't know which way they're going to go. They're kind of swaying based off the results, and Milwaukee has too. They've totally overhauled their rotations, and it does seem like more of a normal thing for the playoffs now is when things change drastically, there's going to be drastic adjustments made in turn. So where are they going from here, you think, now that the series is 2-2? Are we going to see Monroe, or are we going to see that rotation that got the Celtics back in Game 4, which was Semi Ojeleye out there with Tatum at the 4. They've played Morris at the 4 quite a bit in the series too. So what direction are they going to sway in?
I think that, something that I thought that was, really interesting is I've looked up and, the Celtics starters have actually outplayed the Bucks starters, which, it kind of makes sense when you think about it, because this is that what's really killing the Celtics is their bench. Guys like Morris, Shane Larkin, Greg Monroe are very negative in the series, like in terms of plus minus. But if you look at them individually, some of the lineups that they've been out there with that have them with starters like Morris and the starters or Monroe and the starters, those lineups have had a little bit more success. So it's when the Celtics go to these more pure bench units that they really mess up, and that's and I think that that's kind of a byproduct of the turnovers again. I think one thing that's would really help is if Marcus Smart was available for Game 5, that would really change the complexion of this series a lot. Just because Shane Larkin, God bless his heart, he's a competitor, I guess, some might say. Competitor. But he, he's just too small, and especially against this long Bucks defense, it's an absolute nightmare matchup.
Yeah, he got plowed over on a switch by Parker one play, I remember.
Yeah, and it's just and it's a big difference to have Shane Larkin in the post versus hell beast Marcus Smart in the post. There's those two. Those are just wildly different things. And something else I think Marcus Smart can really help is just playmaking. I mean, the Celtics, besides Al Horford, they really don't have a lot of playmaking on the roster. Terry Rozier has done a nice job getting those assists, but that's not his. You see Terry Rozier try and make a lob play, and it's clear that point guard is not really his skill set. He's really more of a small shooting guard, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's allowing the Bucks to sort of wall off at the point of attack and send 3 guys into the paint when the Celtics do get in there low, and those backdoor lobs, things like that, are open. And I would like to see Marcus Smart kind of get some primary ball handling duties when he comes back, and see if he and Al have a great lob rhythm. And I think Marcus could really exploit the Bucks when they do cheat to one side like that, because the Celtics really haven't been making them pay with that, particularly on these with how hard Maker is biting on everything, and just how many guys they're showing where they're basically letting Giannis play free safety out there. So
yep.
it would I think that would really help to just get some bigger, more steady playmaking when it makes sense, because everyone's injured.
And when this episode drops, Marcus Smart's going to be seeing the doctor, and he is questionable for Game 5, which blew up Twitter, and for right reasons, because he is a guy they've missed so much on both ends of the floor, for all the reasons you said, and the fact that he's just another guy who can fit in those smaller lineups. And that does seem, that's where I think this series is going, is that by Game 7, and I do think this is going 7 games now, hard to think it won't, they're just going to be running small lineups right at each other, and whatever team is going to be stretching the floor better, creating space better, is going to take this one, and we'll see where that goes with Smart's return.
And I'm really excited to see, just because I think Giannis is one of the underrated hothead guys in the NBA. Because he's so like off the court, he's got such a joyful demeanor and he's so happy. But on the court, like he lets the game get away from him sometimes, like in his temper and stuff. And I just feel like Marcus Smart is custom built to sort of do some chicanery there to kind of make Giannis lose his temper a little bit. So that's something else, I'll be looking for. But I really think, you got to think Jason Tatum's going to get going at some point. I don't know when, but I can't imagine they're just going to be able to keep putting Brogdon and Tony Snell on him with no consequences, because that's the other, kind of thing that's jumping out to me, especially with Jaylen Brown stepping up the way he has.
And Game 3 was a complete wash. We don't have to really get into that one too much. But Game 4 did have some interesting topics out of it. The lineups, of course. I think you're going to see Smart in the role that Semi Ojeleye did in that lineup that pushed the 20-6 run to get them back in it. Tatum at 4, I think, is really interesting, because that's a role he started in early on this year and didn't quite persist throughout the year. They started going bigger, and that just carried on throughout the year. And Morris would get spurts at that 4 spot, but they kind of threw away that small ball 4 for the most part this year, and now it's making a little bit of a comeback. So it's good to see him out there with a little bit of a support from some muscle, like Semi or Smart. Yeah. He needs it out there, because those battles at the 4 can still be tough, even in small ball. The biggest storyline out of Game 4 was the last shot Morris took, the play that set it up. Jared Weiss had a big piece on that. I think we probably covered it as well a little bit. What did you think of that play? A lot of people were ripping it today.
If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. I think Jared had asked Brad after the game, and got this full story, and it was designed to be a Terry Rozier 3 for the win, but the Bucks had kind of sniffed it out. So a busted play, is a busted play. You got to kind of credit the Bucks, and in that case, I guess. Marcus Morris taking it isn't the worst thing in the world, but I think it's probably a little bit more of a testament to how spoiled we are with Brad Stevens' play calling. That when the Celtics do seemingly botch a playoff call like this, that we all, myself included, get pretty mad about it. I'm not too worried about it as like a indictment of Brad or anything. I think you just gotta kind of tip your hat to Milwaukee's defense for figuring it out correctly, the action, and then doing what they had to do. I think a good way to not be in that situation at the end of the game was to turn the ball over a million times. I think that that was they could have had those 2 points back if Marcus Morris didn't roll the ball.
We're gonna blame Morris on both ends.
Yeah, I'll excuse him from that one. But man, that was bad. That turnover. There's like a pretty staggering stat that he and Monroe have 16 turnovers in the series, and I think 4 assists, 3 assists. Like. It's not great.
Monroe's rotating in slow motion. It's bad. It's been widely noted, and he is having a tough time on the defensive end still, which has been a consistent throughout his Celtics tenure. And I'll give him credit. The guy goes hard. He definitely has an intensity on the defensive end, but just not the footwork, not the speed to match it. And he's going to be tough to play the rest of this series.
Yeah, I don't think both Morris and, Monroe, those guys clearly care. I'd rather those guys do what they're doing now, where it's, it's more like a wild, frenetic energy that, they want to contribute and they want to help, and, the heat of the moment, and they're, doing what they have to do. It's up tempo, it's energy, but it's just, it's not being there, and they're turning the ball over. And I think that, this isn't necessarily what, the Celtics need in this series. Do you think that, Bobby, I want to ask you, do you feel like, because this is something I kind of noticed, do you feel like that they the Bucks sort of having a history with Monroe, having him on the team, do you think that's kind of working against him as well? Because it seems like they kind of, they know his bag of tricks a little bit, and that seems to, they seem to be guarding him a little better with some of that stuff.
It can't hurt, absolutely. Yeah. And it's funny that we were asking early on whether they would have taken Monroe back for the series early on in exchange for Bledsoe because of how poorly he was playing, and he has reversed the trend too. And I'll give that team credit. I couldn't name the coach of them going into this. I probably should as a guy who covers the NBA, but I couldn't. And Prenti has done a nice job. He has. And I wonder, too, has he outcoached Stevens in this? And I know Stevens has only had a handful of personnel to choose from, but the key adjustment in this series so far has been bringing Maker into the fold. And Brad had a little bit of a mini adjustment with small ball in Game 4, but they still lost the game.
My thing is, Prenti doesn't get credit for that when it took John Henson getting hurt to, insert Thon Maker. So I will.
And there's also the fact that he just wasn't playing those guys to begin with in Boston, which was a brutal mistake.
Yeah, and I also I credit Joe Prenti for some of his other work though. I think he did a good job trying to outlaw the X-Men. But other than that, he's been. It's been downhill since he joined the NBA and got out of the U.S. Senate. So it's good to see him at least out there, trying some stuff. I think this is a Bucks team that's going to be scary when they get a real coach. You know what I'm saying? I think this is more. I think the Bucks resurgence should probably be credited a little bit more to their talented guys sort of finding themselves. And you got to kind of you got to credit. We kind of forget how young this Bucks team is, you know what I'm saying, up and down the lineup. Middleton is really the only key player who's, I would kind of consider a veteran at this point. Guys like Maker, I guess Bledsoe has been around the NBA for a while as well. But, guys like Bledsoe, Thon Maker.
Fairly new to the team, though.
Parker. Yeah. I mean, these guys haven't had much of a chance to play together. They're all pretty young. This is, one of the more talented teams in the East, and I think it's probably bad luck that the Celtics, as the name of the game in Celtics season, that they're catching them when they're getting healthy. They're getting Brogdon back, and that removes guys like Sterling Brown from the rotation. I think this is kind of the Bucks are sort of a little bit late, but on the fly in a playoff series, morphing into kind of who we thought they were going to be, for the whole season. I think this was the Bucks team that everyone expected to see, and it just took sort of the playoff crucible and that ratcheted intensity to kind of bring this out of them.
Yeah, and we ripped into them rightfully so last week, and I'm going to give them credit now, especially for the drafting. I don't think they get enough credit for the amazing drafting they've done over the last 5-6 years when it comes to Giannis, how late they picked him in that draft. Maker, he hasn't panned out so far, but if it's going to happen in the first round of the playoffs, you'll take it. Brogdon, a second-round Rookie of the Year. Middleton, they didn't draft, but a good trade to get him in there out of Detroit. And then you go as far down as
you can keep going. I mean, I mean,
Parker too.
Parker, like he hasn't panned out, but this is more of an injury, thing than anything. It's gonna be fascinating to see how his contract negotiations play out this year. It's crazy that he's already at the point where he was entering restricted free agency. And, it's funny to think about, how many Celtics fans on draft night would have drove Marcus Smart to the airport if we could have had Jabari Parker instead of, Marcus
They're both
Smart.
in similar boats, it feels like, going into their restricted free agencies.
Yeah. I just feel like I would not be surprised if Marcus Smart got more money than Jabari Parker. That's going to be my hot take. But I don't know. I think that this is a Bucks squad that, like, God, if they just didn't trade away some draft picks with their the weird Grievous Vasquez move they made a couple of years ago, and they whiffed a little bit on Rashad Vaughn, but they've hit on a lot of these other guys, and I think Thon Maker is going to be like a really good player. I make jokes about his age, but he really is still a very young kid, and he's learning the game at an increasing rate. Everything they say about him is he's one of these guys I think the Celtics would have liked to have because everything you hear about him is he's such a hard worker and such a nice kid, and just so humble, and those guys have a way of making it if they care about the game. And you can tell Thon Maker really cares about the game when he's parking the ball in the second tier over and over again. Just an absolute monster in the paint. So this is a Bucks team that's, really coming along. But, I still think the Celtics, were they healthy, would handle them pretty handily. But it's just, you got to work with what you got to work with,
Absolutely. So 2 more topics I want to hit today. The first of them is Jason Tatum's play in this series. You've dove into that a little bit. His first playoff series, his introduction to the postseason, many of them ahead, I would say. Mm-hmm. You went back and forth on whether they need more from him. Jaylen Brown has been an A+. I think anyone would agree on that, but there's been spurts of struggle from the field for Tatum. How would you gauge his play so far?
I would say his play has been downright Marcus Smart-esque, which I'm not sure if I mean that as a compliment or not. Like if you look at they had Twitter account NBA Math has a really interesting thing where they use they calculate TPA, which is total points added. It's basically a measure of offensive and defensive efficiency and how much they estimate a player to be worth. And if you look at on these graphs where Jason Tatum is rating out, he's like pretty much an average player for the series, but he's way behind on the offense. Like his offense is terrible, but his defense is way up there. And it's because of he's just turned himself into almost sort of like a Giannis light without the scoring, just in his ability to sort of,
he's Marcus Smart and Giannis.
He's everything. And that's he's just been the Celtics. The reason the Celtics have stood a chance in this series is they've absolutely just smashed Milwaukee on the glass. That's the one thing that has not changed.
Yes.
And why
Aaron Baines has been very good in that capacity. He deserves some credit.
Absolutely.
There.
And quick tangent on Aaron Baines. I love Aaron Baines because Aaron Baines will get postered 9 times a game and just does not care. Does not care. Like Aaron Baines is like poster proof. You could like show him Twitter clips. He's just like a jolly guy who's just out there like, he looks like he'd be in like Jon Snow's Wildling Army, and he's out there trying to like block. He will contest all the shots, and he's gotten his hands on some of them. He's jammed up some of Giannis's dunk attempts, but those don't get played, 9 times on SportsCenter on ultra slow mo. But just the Celtics rebounding is what's been just absolutely phenomenal for them in this series, and I think that's very consistent. It's been consistent over the 4 games. It's one of the few things that's been consistent for the Celtics, and why I still think they have a really good chance to win this series with some of Milwaukee's hot 3-point shooting and the turnovers if they just get that under control. And Jason Tatum's been a big part of that, rebounding in these small ball lineups with him and Al Horford out there, finding ways to get in there on the glass. Jaylen Brown doing this as well, helping out from the 2-guard spot. And he's just had a lot of steals, a lot of blocks for him. He's just being in the right place and being disruptive in a series where the Celtics really need that. So, on the one hand, there's that. But on the other hand, this is a guy who offensively was just so lethal throughout the year, and we really saw it at the end of the year that he sort of turned back into what he was during that initial Celtics win streak, where he looked like a rookie of the year candidate till Simmons and Mitchell really took off, and he sort of settled in at 3rd place. And this is what we're going to expect of him going forward is I think is to be like sort of this smooth Paul Pierce style scorer who's got a whole bag of tricks and all these moves. And you see it sometimes. There was that incredible reverse he had where he was like 8 feet by the basket and just threw it up over his shoulder off the glass.
He'll go wide and left and finish right from like a very far angle. And I was high on him coming out of the draft. You weren't so much, but I think we were both stunned at the fact that you're never going to live that one down, unfortunately.
I'm done. That's all right. You take it out. This is the game it takes. I'm retired from the draft. Danny Ainge has owned me in like 13 straight drafts. I didn't like the Jaylen Brown pick.
Throwing it back to that Parker draft, he wanted Embiid too if we look back on it. So if they were in position, they probably would have won that draft too. But anyway, think about the fact that this guy is going to be the perfect for the future of this league. He's so tall. He's taller than they list. I guarantee that. And the way he blocks shots around the rim, the length, and then stretching the floor on the offensive end, he brings you everything you need on both ends of the floor. So now the fact that he's making up for some of his offensive struggles with the defense, like you talked about, is just incredible. And he's still knocking down the three at a high rate, which we forget was the other concern of his coming out of college. So both of the biggest concerns we had from him out of Duke have turned into his biggest strengths in this series. So that is something to behold, a big positive with Brown's growth and just the experience they're going to get. Now, that's why I want to see them go to the next round, is get 5, 6, 7 extra games under their belt as a team. Marcus Smart back in there will also help. But should we expect the Celtics to win this series?
I don't. Expect is like a strong word. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's a 3-game series at this point. You know, the Celtics do have home court. You know, they got to take care of the ball. I think particularly if Smart comes back and he does, you know, he looked like the Marcus Smart he was when he, you know, came back from his fight with the picture frame earlier this year. I think, you know, we'll see him, you know. I think the Celtics should be the favorites, especially if Marcus Smart comes back, because, you know, Shane Larkin has just been abysmal in terms of, you know, plus minus. I think just because that size really does not, it's not really Shane's fault. This is just not the series for him. So to have Marcus Smart in there and kind of, you know, plugging up these, you know, that Band-Aid thing, I think these tight games will sort of swing in the favor of the Celtics, especially if they can continue to control the glass the way they have, and they, you know, do some minor adjustments, like, you know, maybe utilizing pump fakes a little bit more to get Thon Maker in the air because he's biting on everything, you know, or things like that. I think Celtics fans, in spite of the, you know, how bad that Game 4 loss was, I think the Celtics fans should still feel pretty good going into Game 5. I think if the Celtics lose Game 5, that's when you kind of start to panic. But I'm still pretty optimistic. I still give the Celtics, you know, a 60-40 edge to win this series, just because what they've been doing seems to be more sustainable to me than what the Bucks have been doing.
Yeah, I'm still leaning toward the fact that they should win it. I'm in that department. I'm going to stay over there. I want that extra series, even though it's probably not going to mean much. I think the experience helps. You still have Al Horford, who has played very well here, and that is a very important factor. Jaylen Brown has not matched Giannis's greatness, but he's very close the way he's played so far in this series. So even though the personnel's gone, the depth isn't there, there's still plenty of talent on this team. Marcus Morris has underperformed a little bit, as we've talked about. And the 2-0 lead. You had that 2-0 lead in this series, so that's still something I look to and say I'll just be a little bit disappointed if they aren't able to close this. Now, the expectations aren't there for this team to make a deep run without Irving, Hayward. I understand that. I've gone into it with Snotty dripping about that a little bit, but it's the series, Milwaukee, all the trash talk we had about them last week, the position the Celtics put them in early with the dominance they were showing. I just don't think it would be the greatest look if they regress to the point where they lose this series and lose it bad. If they lose in 6, as the Bucks fans are chanting out there, you know the national media is going to get into them, but I might have to get into them a little bit too. So we'll see where this goes.
Yeah, I think the Celtics will really be in trouble, you know, if they lose this first round series going forward. They're going to have to figure out a way to add, you know, 2 All-Stars to that playoff rotation, and you know,
there you
maybe
go,
some
the
top
rebuttal.
draft picks. Yeah. So I think if the Celtics, you know, that's my panic move. You know, that I just don't see how the Celtics could add to.
So I'll throw one more topic in the segment now, if we're gonna take that approach to next year, because Cleveland, they're not in trouble anymore because they tied the series 2-2. That was a missed opportunity for Indiana the other day, but the East seems up in the air.
Oh, my God, does
If
it?
you had to pick a team who was going to win the East right now, and you probably have an idea of who I'm thinking of right now, but if you had to pick a team to win the East right now, who would it be?
God, see, my brain says Philly, but I'm at war. If the Celtics play Philadelphia in the next round, I will die in the posting wars of 7. Sixers Twitter is going to light me on fire. I'm probably going to go to a game in Philadelphia just to see if I can be one of the fatalities in the rioting down
in the
there.
war.
Yeah. soldier who died in the war. But I don't know. I know the Wizards. This thing has been a thing, but I still kind of believe in the Raptors. I think that the Raptors have been the best team in the East. They've had the best point differential all year. They still have some top shelf talent. They've been in enough playoff series before. I know they've lost them, but they also have the requisite experience. I just don't think Cleveland, I think it's pretty clear, especially with Kevin Love looking injured, that Cleveland has the dogs to run in this race. They might get past Indiana, but I don't see them beating Toronto, and then I don't see, Philly or, even maybe the Celtics or the Bucks or the Heat even, whoever comes out of that other side. I just don't think that Toronto just has so many options. They can go big, they can go small, they can shoot the three, they can play whatever style needs to be played, and they have the star power, the experience. It just feels like it's kind of things have lined up for them this year.
And if that's what you're going with, that's what you have to hope for, because Toronto could be the team that's just in the finals this year, and then that's the end of their run. But just because of the nature of where they're at and their development, if Philly makes the finals this year, that's a whole nother story. And then there's momentum toward the LeBron free agency. If it's not LeBron, there's other big fish out there for them to grab. And for the people who are like, all right, we're running this back in Boston with all the All-Stars, another draft pick the year after that, Philly's progression might put a hold on that, and that's been a fear of mine all year long. So that is the biggest story to watch for the rest of these playoffs, besides how far the Celtics can hold out.
Yeah. It's going to be fun, just to kind of see this Celtics-Sixers hasn't really been a rivalry since way back. You're going to really turn the clock back. But, we had like Dr. J and, Larry just slugging each other. So that's like, it's very old school, the rivalry. But, it's going to be a real fun rivalry, division rivals. That doesn't happen too often. The Atlantic Division has been in a pretty sorry state, pretty much since the early 2000s. So to have, two powerhouses sort of rise at the same time, it's going to be interesting. If Philly does get that big free agent, they're going to lose J.J. Redick, who I think is important to their spacing. It's going to be interesting to see how the guys fit in.
You might add LeBron in his place, which won't hurt too much.
Maybe. I don't know. We'll see. Like, how did Ben Simmons?
Would you trade J.J. Redick for LeBron James?
I would. But I'm just saying, like, Philly kind of needs that spacing. I wonder what I'm going to be really interested to see what Philly does with that, draft cap space, and what happens with their free agent if they kind of, kick the can down the road one more year. To see what Markelle Fultz turns into. He's kind of the one that I think everyone's almost forgetting about a little bit. But their draft chest is pretty much empty. They've pretty much used everything. This Lakers pick is their kind of last chance to get something nice out of it. And the Celtics are just going to keep having, great picks. They could have, the Celtics could end up having like 3 picks or in the top 15 in 2019. So, and one of them could be 2. So,
and if they do have to kick back the candle, this is all a conversation for another show. That helps out too. We'll throw this one back to the offseason. We'll talk to you about it then. But for now, playoff analysis with the guy who does it best, Sam Sheehan.
Bobby, thanks for having me.
That's episode 35. We'll see you when this series concludes.
Reunion Arena in Dallas, where the Mavs and Lakers are playing tonight, was built in 1980. Now, you couldn't ask for a better facility. It's easily accessible, has all the comforts of a theater, and there isn't a bad seat in the house. But for some reason, there are those who prefer the Boston Garden, mostly those who wear Celtic green.
What is so special about the Boston Garden other than the fact that it's 1,000 years old? Let's take a look. First of all, a garden it's not. It's a train station, really. One flight up and you're on the fabled parquet floor. Now, before you get all misty-eyed about the parquet, take a closer look.